Who is Adolf Hitler? Adolf Hitler was one of Germany's leading political leaders, born on April 20, 1889, in the city of Braunau am Inn in the Austro-Hungarian Empire. He was the leader of Nazi Germany, which was one of the most important reasons for World War II. Hitler joined the German Workers' Party, DAP, in 1921 and soon became its leader. He later renamed the party as the National Socialist German Workers' Party, NSDAP. In 1933, he became the Chancellor of Germany and was shortly appointed as the president. Hitler turned Germany into a totalitarian regime and systematically persecuted Jews, Roma people, homosexuals, and other minorities. Under Hitler's leadership, Nazi Germany became the biggest participant in World War II and occupied Europe. At the end of the war, Hitler committed suicide, and Germany was defeated as the losing side of the war. Nazi Germany under Hitler's leadership is considered one of the darkest and most inhumane periods in history. Some text goes here. What kind of leader was Hitler and how did he govern Germany? Some text goes here. Hitler was a dictator and authoritarian leader who governed Germany with an iron fist. He had a highly centralized and authoritarian regime that was characterized by his personal charisma and cult of personality. He had total control over the government and the military, and was not accountable to any legislative or judicial bodies. Hitler used propaganda to maintain his authority and promote his political ideology, which included extreme nationalism, anti-Semitism, and opposition to communism. He established a one-party state, dissolved opposition parties, and abolished civil liberties such as freedom of speech and press. Hitler also oversaw a massive rearmament program and aggressively pursued territorial expansion through military conquest, ultimately leading Germany into World War II. His rule was marked by repression, violence, and genocide, including the systematic extermination of millions of Jews, Romani people, homosexuals, disabled individuals, and others who were deemed undesirable or inferior by the Nazi regime. Why did Hitler have such a strong hatred towards Jews? Hitler's hatred towards Jews was deeply rooted in his personal beliefs and political ideology. He saw Jews as a threat to the Aryan race and believed that they were responsible for many of Germany's problems, including its defeat in World War I, its economic struggles, and its supposed cultural decline. Hitler and other Nazi leaders also promoted the idea of a vast Jewish conspiracy to control the world, which they used to justify their policies of discrimination, segregation, and ultimately genocide. This anti-Semitic rhetoric and propaganda were key components of the Nazi Party's appeal, as it resonated with a wide swath of the German population that was seeking a scapegoat for their frustrations and resentments. Hitler's hatred towards Jews was extreme, and he was committed to their total elimination from Europe, which resulted in the deaths of 6 million Jews during the Holocaust. What was Hitler's political philosophy and ideology? Hitler's political philosophy and ideology were based on a combination of extreme nationalism, racism, and anti-Semitism. He believed in the superiority of the Aryan race, which he saw as a master race destined to rule over all others. Hitler also promoted the idea of Lebensraum, or living space, which called for the acquisition of new territories for German expansion in Eastern Europe. This led to his aggressive foreign policies and eventual invasion of Poland, which triggered the start of World War II. Hitler's political party, the National Socialist German Workers' Party, Nazi Party, also espoused a socialist platform, but their definition of socialism was different from traditional socialist beliefs. They believed in the nationalization of certain industries, but only in the service of the nation as a whole and not for the benefit of the workers. The Nazi Party also advocated for a totalitarian government, where individual rights and freedoms were subordinated to the state's goals and interests. Overall, Hitler's political philosophy and ideology were characterized by extreme nationalism, racism, anti-Semitism, and the glorification of violence and militarism. These beliefs ultimately led to the Nazi Party's rise to power, the outbreak of World War II, and the perpetration of the Holocaust. Some text goes here. How did Hitler manage to bring the Nazi Party to power? Some text goes here. Hitler and the Nazi Party rose to power in Germany through a combination of factors, including their ability to exploit the economic and political instability of the country following World War I. After the Treaty of Versailles was signed, Germany was left in a state of economic and political turmoil. The country was burdened with heavy war reparations and was suffering from hyperinflation and high unemployment rates. This created an atmosphere of desperation and frustration among the German population, which the Nazi Party was able to capitalize on. Hitler's skills as an orator and propagandist were also instrumental in the Nazi Party's rise to power. He used speeches and rallies to appeal to the German people's sense of national pride and to promote his extreme nationalist and anti-Semitic ideology. In addition, the Nazi Party used violence and intimidation tactics to silence their opposition and to solidify their hold on power. They also exploited the weaknesses of the Weimar Republic, Germany's democratic government, and used legal means to gain political influence, such as winning seats in the Reichstag, the German parliament. Finally, in 1933, Hitler was appointed Chancellor of Germany by President Hindenburg, which gave the Nazi Party control of the government. Hitler then used his position to consolidate power and establish a dictatorship, effectively ending democracy in Germany. Overall, the Nazi Party's rise to power was due to a combination of factors, including economic and political instability, Hitler's propaganda and oratory skills, violent tactics, legal means, and the weaknesses of the Weimar Republic. What happened during World War II under Hitler's leadership? During World War II, under Hitler's leadership, Germany invaded and occupied numerous countries, including Poland, France, Belgium, the Netherlands, and the Soviet Union. The war lasted from 1939 until 1945, and it was one of the deadliest conflicts in history, resulting in millions of civilian and military casualties. Hitler's leadership led to the implementation of the Holocaust, the systematic extermination of 6 million Jews and other minorities. Ultimately, Hitler's leadership resulted in Germany's defeat and the downfall of the Nazi regime. What is known about Hitler's death and the aftermath? Hitler's death has been a subject of controversy and speculation for many years. According to historical accounts, Hitler committed suicide by gunshot on April 30, 1945, in his bunker in Berlin, as Allied forces were closing in on the city. His wife, Eva Braun, also committed suicide alongside him. The bodies were reportedly burned and buried in a shell crater in the garden outside the bunker. After Hitler's death, Germany surrendered on May 7, 1945, effectively ending the war in Europe. The Allied powers then conducted the Nuremberg trials, a series of trials that prosecuted major Nazi leaders for war crimes, crimes against humanity, and other atrocities committed during the war. Many of Hitler's top officials, including Joseph Goebbels and Heinrich Himmler, had either committed suicide or were captured by the Allies and faced trial. The Nazi regime was ultimately dismantled, and the aftermath of World War II led to the division of Germany and the beginning of the Cold War. What were Hitler's efforts to modernize and renew Germany? Hitler had a grand vision for Germany, which he believed could be achieved through a series of radical changes in various sectors of society. He sought to modernize and renew Germany in a number of ways, including 1. Rebuilding the economy. After World War I, Germany was in economic ruins, and Hitler promised to rebuild the country's economy by creating jobs, increasing trade, and reducing unemployment. He established public works programs to build infrastructure and invested heavily in industrial production, particularly in the areas of steel, coal, and electricity. 2. Rearmament. Hitler believed that Germany had been weakened by the Treaty of Versailles, which had imposed severe restrictions on its military capabilities. He launched a massive rearmament program, building up the German army, navy, and air force, in direct violation of the treaty. 3. Propaganda. Hitler understood the importance of propaganda in shaping public opinion, and he invested heavily in this area. The Nazi Party used propaganda to spread its message, create a sense of unity and purpose, and build support for Hitler's vision. 4. Education and youth. Hitler saw education and youth as critical components in building a strong and loyal society. He restructured the education system to promote Nazi ideology and values, and established youth organizations to indoctrinate young people in Nazi beliefs. 5. Architecture and art. Hitler believed that architecture and art were important expressions of national identity, and he sought to transform the German landscape through monumental architecture and public art. He commissioned large-scale building projects, such as the Nazi Party rally grounds in Nuremberg, and promoted a style of art that celebrated traditional German culture and ideals. While some of these efforts did bring about tangible changes in Germany, many of Hitler's policies were ultimately disastrous, leading to war, genocide, and the destruction of much of Europe. Some text goes here. Why is the Nazi regime, under Hitler's leadership, considered so deadly and inhumane in history? Some text goes here. The Nazi regime, under Hitler's leadership, is considered so deadly and inhumane in history due to a number of factors. Firstly, the regime was responsible for the Holocaust, the systematic murder of approximately 6 million Jews and other groups deemed undesirable by the Nazi ideology. This included the use of concentration camps, gas chambers, and other methods of extermination. Secondly, Hitler's aggressive foreign policy led to the outbreak of World War II, which resulted in the deaths of tens of millions of people. What is known about Hitler's personal life and what myths surround his life? Hitler was a notoriously private person, and much of his personal life remains shrouded in secrecy. However, some information is known about his personal life. Here are some facts and myths about Hitler's personal life. Hitler was born in Austria in 1889 and spent his childhood in poverty. He served as a soldier during World War I and was injured several times. Hitler was an artist and painted many works, but he was rejected from art school twice. He was married to Eva Braun for a short time before they both committed suicide in a bunker in Berlin as Allied forces closed in during the final days of World War II. It is often claimed that Hitler had only one testicle, but there is no evidence to support this rumor. There is a myth that Hitler was vegetarian, but this is not entirely true. While he did have some dietary restrictions, he was not a strict vegetarian. Another myth is that Hitler was a brilliant military strategist, but in reality, his military decisions were often flawed and he made many strategic errors during World War II. It's important to note that while some aspects of Hitler's personal life may be interesting or surprising, they do not excuse or justify the atrocities committed under his leadership. Some text goes here. How did Hitler's childhood and early life experiences shape his political views and leadership style? Some text goes here. Hitler's childhood and early life experiences played a significant role in shaping his political views and leadership style. He was born in Austria in 1889 and grew up in a lower middle-class family. His father was a customs official, and his mother was a housewife. Hitler's father was known to be strict and abusive, which may have contributed to Hitler's later authoritarian tendencies. As a young man, Hitler was a struggling artist and lived in poverty. He was also deeply affected by the loss of his younger brother, who died when Hitler was a teenager. These experiences may have contributed to his sense of anger, resentment, and disillusionment with society. Hitler's experiences during World War I also played a significant role in shaping his political views. He served as a soldier in the German army and was deeply affected by the defeat of Germany. He became convinced that Germany's defeat was the result of betrayal by Jewish and socialist elements within German society, and this belief would later become a central tenet of his political ideology. Overall, Hitler's childhood and early life experiences contributed to his sense of anger, disillusionment, and resentment towards society. These experiences, combined with his experiences during World War I, helped to shape his political views and leadership style, which were marked by authoritarianism, nationalism, and a deep-seated hatred of Jews and other minority groups. Some text goes here. What were the key events that led to the rise of the Nazi Party, and how did Hitler use propaganda to gain support? Some text goes here. The key events that led to the rise of the Nazi Party include the economic and political instability in Germany following World War I, the Treaty of Versailles, the hyperinflation of the 1920s, and the Great Depression of the 1930s. Hitler used propaganda to gain support by manipulating people's emotions and fears, creating a cult of personality around himself, and using slogans and symbols to create a sense of unity and pride among his followers. He also used media, such as newspapers and radio, to spread his message and suppress opposition. The Nazi Party held mass rallies and used violence and intimidation to silence political opponents and create an atmosphere of fear. Through these tactics, Hitler was able to gain widespread support and rise to power in Germany. Some text goes here. How did Hitler's policies towards minority groups, such as Jews, Romani people, and disabled individuals, contribute to the atrocities committed during the Holocaust? Some text goes here. Hitler's policies towards minority groups were a central factor in the atrocities committed during the Holocaust. Hitler and the Nazi regime held an extreme form of racism and anti-Semitism, which they used to justify their persecution and murder of Jews, as well as other minority groups such as Romani people, disabled individuals, and LGBTQ+ people. Hitler believed in the concept of the master race and viewed Jews as a threat to the purity of the Aryan race. He also believed that Romani people were racially inferior and saw disabled individuals as a drain on the state's resources. These beliefs were reflected in the policies and actions of the Nazi regime, which included forced sterilization of disabled individuals, the Nuremberg laws that stripped Jews of their citizenship and rights, and ultimately the genocide of 6 million Jews and millions of others during the Holocaust. The persecution of Jews and other minority groups was implemented through a series of policies and actions, including confiscation of property, forced labor, deportation to concentration camps, and ultimately extermination in gas chambers. The Nazi regime also used propaganda to spread anti-Semitic and racist messages, portraying Jews and other minorities as subhuman and a threat to the German people. This propaganda was used to gain support for the regime's policies and actions, including the Holocaust. Some text goes here. What was the impact of Hitler's military strategy and decision-making on the outcome of World War II? Some text goes here. Hitler's military strategy and decision-making had a significant impact on the outcome of World War II. He was known for his aggressive and risky approach, which resulted in several successes early in the war. However, his leadership style also led to several major mistakes and miscalculations that ultimately contributed to the defeat of Nazi Germany. One of Hitler's biggest military mistakes was his decision to invade the Soviet Union, which ultimately led to the downfall of the Nazi regime. Despite initial successes, the Soviet Union's vast resources and ability to mobilize their population for war proved too much for Germany to overcome. Hitler's refusal to acknowledge the changing circumstances and his insistence on a total war strategy also led to significant losses for Germany on both the Eastern and Western fronts. Additionally, Hitler's micromanagement of military affairs and his distrust of his military commanders often led to conflicting orders and confusion on the battlefield. His refusal to allow strategic retreats and his insistence on fighting to the last man also resulted in unnecessary casualties and losses. Overall, Hitler's military strategy and decision-making played a major role in the outcome of World War II, contributing both to early successes and ultimate defeat. Some text goes here: how did the Allied powers, including the United States, the United Kingdom, and the Soviet Union, respond to Hitler and the Nazi regime before and during the war? Some text goes here: the Allied powers had varying responses to Hitler and the Nazi regime before and during World War II. The United States initially pursued a policy of isolationism, meaning they aimed to avoid getting involved in European conflicts. However, President Franklin D. Roosevelt eventually began to provide military and economic aid to the Allied powers, including the United Kingdom and the Soviet Union, through programs such as the Lend-Lease Act. The United Kingdom, under the leadership of Prime Minister Winston Churchill, staunchly opposed Hitler and the Nazi regime from the outset. Churchill delivered speeches warning about the dangers of appeasing Hitler and advocating for the UK to take a firm stance against Nazi aggression. The Soviet Union, led by Joseph Stalin, initially signed a non-aggression pact with Nazi Germany in 1939, which allowed Hitler to invade Poland without fear of Soviet intervention. However, when Germany invaded the Soviet Union in 1941, Stalin became a key leader of the Allied powers and played a crucial role in the defeat of Nazi Germany. Overall, the Allied powers recognized the threat posed by Hitler and the Nazi regime and worked together to defeat them during World War II.